We often marvel at the physical endurance of ancient papyrus, yet the human cost behind that survival is easily forgotten. These fragments carry the weight of terrified witnesses and grieving families whose messy realities were slowly scrubbed from the record. This is the result of institutional memory. We typically assume that after the crucifixion, power was seamlessly handed off to the famous apostles we recognize today. But the evidence suggests the movement's early leadership stayed within a much tighter circle, Jesus' own biological family. Their struggle for survival was the foundational story that institutional history eventually decided to overwrite. In 70 CE, the Roman Empire destroyed Jerusalem, burning the temple and scattering the early Jesus movement into the diaspora. It was a complete and total civilizational collapse. Amidst the wreckage, Jesus' biological cousin, Simeon, son of Clopas, stepped into the void. He took over the leadership and guided the traumatized refugees for 40 crucial years. Simeon spent his life building bridges. He arranged the order of foundational Jewish prayers and compiled the original Evangelion, an early gospel text used by the Nazarene community as a pastoral survival manual. Yet, after holding the community together through an apocalypse, Simeon was targeted by the most effective identity theft in history. By the 2nd century, he had been erased from 3 different directions. The first erasure began with the story of the road to Emmaus. Instead of a gentle theological walk, the narrative describes a trauma-induced flight response. Jesus' uncle, Clopas, and his cousin Simeon were frantically trying to put miles between themselves and the site of the execution in Jerusalem. Their nervous systems were so overloaded that they experienced inattentional blindness, a psychological state where the brain fails to recognize a visible object because its focus is elsewhere. They only recognized the stranger when he broke bread, a specific family muscle memory that finally broke through their grief. Father and son rushed back to the disciples in Jerusalem to report the news. Clopas, the father, burst into the room and declared, "The Lord is indeed risen and has appeared to Simon." This chart maps how the author of Luke names the lead apostle. After chapter 6, the name Simon is retired, replaced strictly by the title Peter. But here in the final chapter, we see a sudden return to the name Simon. This break in the author's strict convention indicates that he is no longer referring to the apostle, but to the other Simon in the family, the cousin, Simeon. As the text moved away from the local family, it was pulled in by onomastic gravity, the historical tendency of a famous name to absorb lesser-known figures who happened to share it. Readers simply assumed Simon must mean the famous apostle. The Galilean fisherman eventually swallowed the identity of the Jerusalem bishop, effectively hiding Simeon behind a more famous name for 2,000 years. The second erasure happened within Rabbinic Judaism. At the Academy of Yavne, Simeon was known as Shimon HaPekuli. He was the scholar commissioned to arrange the order of the Amidah, the central standing prayer that remains the cornerstone of Jewish liturgy. Simeon designed the prayers to be a liturgical bridge. He used ambiguous phrasing regarding Onosaya so that traditional Jews and his own Nazarene followers could still pray side by side. To end this overlap, the rabbinic leader Rabban Gamaliel II added a 19th blessing. It was a loyalty trap designed to curse the heretics aloud, making it impossible for Simeon's followers to stay in the synagogue without cursing themselves. We found the proof in the Cairo Geniza, a storage room for sacred texts that lay forgotten for nearly a millennium. These unredacted manuscripts proved the 19th blessing explicitly cursed the Nazarenes, the early sect of Jewish followers of Jesus, by name. Later rabbinic tradition completed the erasure by claiming HaPekuli merely meant Simeon was a cotton dealer. This reinterpretation stripped him of his status as a religious authority and buried his true identity. The prayer Simeon arranged to hold his community together was transformed into the very wall that permanently locked him out of Jewish history. The final erasure was a physical mutilation. In 14 CE, a theologian named Marcion sought to sever Christianity from its Jewish roots, claiming that Jesus had no connection to the physical world or the Hebrew God. Marcion adopted Simeon's original Evangelion manuscript as his primary text, but he realized the family-centric Emmaus story directly contradicted his anti-physical theology. The Emmaus story functioned as a built-in signature. By naming his own father, Clopas, as the primary source, Simeon provided his followers with a way to verify the document's Jerusalem origins. To hide these Jewish origins, Marcion used a textual scalpel, surgically excising the Road to Emmaus narrative from the manuscript entirely. Marcion committed a total identity theft. He scraped the author's Jewish signature off the page to build a religion that had no room for the family who started it. By the end of the 2nd century, Simeon's legacy was gone. Gentile Christians gave his life's work to Peter, while rabbinic Jews dismissed him as a cotton merchant. Simeon's fate reveals the underlying mechanics of history. In a record shaped by two conflicting extremes, those standing in the middle are the first to be squeezed out of existence. The slow, physical mutilation of Simeon's parchment required iron knives and centuries of effort. Today, we exist in a frictionless digital landscape where our memories and records are far more fragile. If ancient institutions could thoroughly delete a 40-year leader using only ink and stone, how much easier is it for the institutions of the future? We have to wonder whose messy realities and family truths are being quietly edited out of the record right now, simply by pressing delete.